Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us so early. And welcome to this workshop on the EDCTP Knowledge Hub. I'm here together with Trudy Lang from the Global Health Network, and my name's Lara Pandya. I'm a Senior Strategic Partnerships Officer at EDCTP. And together with my colleague Johanna Schaefer, we are responsible for liaising with the Global Health Network on the development of this hub and also the future development. So open data is of importance to EDCTP. We, as with the EU, consider open data sharing to be extremely important. And this is on the background of various things. We know that information about data sharing is dispersed, it's difficult to find, and we've heard from many researchers that there are numerous challenges in the ways that data can be shared. And so we felt, on the background of feedback from many other funders and researchers, that it was important to try and develop some comprehensive tools to guide researchers through the how, where, and when of data sharing. And we know that, of course, good data sharing is also very important for then, in the end, coming up with good policies that could be developed on the basis of that, the results from the data. And we know also that many funders are also increasingly requiring from their grantees that they share their data as well. And so in the absence at the time, I mean, this was back in 2017, I think, wasn't it, Trudy, that we decided to develop this knowledge hub. At the time, there really wasn't any, in one sort of convenient place, good guidance on how you could share your data, how you could manage your data, and so on. So together we decided to develop this knowledge hub. We really wanted to try and make sure that, especially in low and middle income countries where access to these tools can be very limited, we wanted to make sure that there was some appropriate guidance and support to help researchers to achieve these objectives. And so we developed this open online, open source clinical trials and data sharing hub through the Global Health Network. And it has currently it has three main sections: a data management portal for better clinical data management. It has a one-stop data sharing toolkit and a repository finder. And it has a clinical trials protocol builder for the development and crowd review of clinical trial protocols. And these have now, I think we launched it in November 2020. And so we now already have a few years of user experiences that we're now trying to get feedback on and see how we can improve. But we see that these tools are very needed and they seem to be very well received. We had several webinars, feedback from various grantees, and just to emphasize that this isn't just for EDCTP grantees. It's open to anyone from anywhere, even beyond, obviously, the regions that we fund, so beyond Africa. But, of course, we strongly encourage our African grantees to access this and use the tools. So today we're going to give you a little bit of an introduction to that Knowledge Hub, show you what we have now, and then talk a little bit about our future plans. We'll get to that soon. I don't know, Trudy, was there another slide? Yeah, I think this was you. Whether you want to say a few words?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lara. It's great to be with you all this morning. Thank you all for getting up, and those online who have joined us as well. It's just this fantastic partnership we've had with EDCTP actually from the beginning for the Global Health Network, and I've been involved with EDCTP since the very beginning. We heard about on Tuesday night when I was working at TDR when EDCTP began. So it's really excellent to be here, particularly this week, but also have this opportunity to kind of showcase the work we've been doing with EDCTP, but also what we want to do next. Now, there's no such thing as a free coffee, so I hope you have had some coffees. This is definitely billed as a workshop. So we'll wake you all up and get the synapses firing in a second, because we really want to hear from you. Because as Lara explained, we set out with the EDCTP Knowledge Hub on the Global Health Network quite a few years ago, a real focus on data management and data sharing and how to use your, think about your data as you collect it from the beginning, and also in the context of building a protocol. And we've got a crowd consensus tool, and Sam's going to show you all that in a second. And we're now going to evolve that. And so we want to hear from you around what would be useful. So I know there's lots of young researchers in the room. Thanks for you all coming. And I can see there's lots of colleagues that I've worked with for almost 30 years as well. So hello to you. So there's huge experience in the room and probably online to really help us think about what would be useful. So I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to explain about how this sits within the Global Health Network and why that makes this useful. And as Lara just said, this is a global platform, and so we know already that the resources on the EDCTP hub within this are used across Africa, Asia, Latin America, anywhere where there's resource-limited settings, and that we also obviously cross-link, so some of the wider resources, somebody might come to the EDCTP hub to find some information on building a protocol, but then they'll be pointed to find a training course on, say, community engagement or something. So I'll just take a couple of seconds and then pass to Sam, but just begin to get your synapses fired because we're going to be handing to you all to do some work very shortly. So I'm sure you hopefully all know the Global Health Network. This has been around for over 14 years now. It began in East Africa, really at the outset of the EDCTP Networks of Excellence, which is a really important heritage to the Global Health Network and how it began, always hand in hand with EDCTP from the beginning. And the whole point was to try and provide equity to access to information. You know, the idea was that if you didn't have one of these big programs around you that we all, you know, the big sites we all know and love that many of us have worked in, if you were a researcher working at somewhere else where you didn't have that big resource centre around you, how could you do studies that were exactly as high standard and have exactly the same access to tools, training, resources as methods? That's always been the goal, and it still is. And I often say all the Global Health Network does is move information from, like osmosis, from centres of excellence to people who want to become excellent. And so for you young researchers in the room, pointing at some people I've spoken to already this week, we're on it. And it's, you know, this is what it's all for. So, so this is how we can really harness this idea here. So the idea is to have these communities of practice, and within the Global Health Network digital platform, we've got over 60 of these connected communities, and so this is where the EDCTP hub sits. It's one of 60 others. Others are run by organisations like CEPI. We've got Welcome, we've got a community engagement facility. We've got topics such as outbreaks. We've got all the networks of excellence and the outbreak networks. So all these component hubs cover particular topic areas like community engagement or data science or research uptake, or they cover particular consortia or groups. And those are often disease-related, maternal health, infection. We've got a new area for malaria. It's just gone up, a little overdue, just a few millennia. And we've obviously covered all the outbreaks. So it sits within this, and this means you can move the information across, but the whole focus is on workplace learning. So we have this huge effort where most people who know the network come because they find their GCP course, the Good Laboratory Practice course we developed with the public-private partnerships. And there's many, many courses, tools and resources that many of you know and use all the time. And so the point is these EDCTP-focused tools are part of that whole offering. So they're very much designed to support all the EDCTP grantees, but other groups can find them too, and vice versa, that the EDCTP teams can find these very focused tools we have here, but they can also access the other resources, say, on community engagement or research management. So it's all about moving knowledge. And last year, Tedros and the science division at the World Health Organization made the Global Health Network a collaborating centre, a WHO collaborating centre. So that's a really nice endorsement of the role that the Global Health Network plays as a neutral broker and this convener and has this ability to move knowledge around. So at that introduction, I'm going to pass to Sam to just explain a little bit more about the particular resources that are available in the hub, and then we'll come back to talk about getting you guys to do some work with what we do next. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you, Trudy. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Driver. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the resources manager at the Global Health Network, and over the last few years I've been working with our wonderful team at TGHN and EDCTP on creating the Knowledge Hub and the resources on there. So as Lara said at the top, the EDCTP Knowledge Hub is basically an area that's divided up into three spaces. There's a space on protocol development, data management and data sharing. And I'll give you a quick background of the methodology we use to create these, and then talk a bit about the resources we have within them. So the team carried out some scoping exercises and ran with the findings from various workshops we ran. We carried out a gap analysis and trying to identify the gaps in the literature and gaps on the web and gaps around the globe for these particular areas in research. So through the feedback we received, we created these three areas, and in each one there is a toolkit that takes a researcher through steps, how to build a protocol, how to manage your data and how to share your data. Very high level, beginner level steps which you can follow step by step or dive into at various stages. And within each area, as well as the basics and the steps, we also have tools that support researchers along the way. So Lara mentioned we have these crowd review tools within there, protocol building tools, study walkthrough toolkits, and a database of resources that we've found in our scoping exercise to point people to other useful guidance or templates or resources. So these areas have been really popular and really support early career researchers, but also those who want to dip in and out to learn more about the process and maybe get some feedback from the community on the network. So this is an example of the protocol development toolkit steps and the crowd review tools and how it's all laid out. It's all very interactive and easy to find. The data management portal is similar. It can take people through the stages and what to consider at each step. And similarly to the data sharing toolkit. And there's resources there that are downloadable, so you can read them offline too. And now I'll pass back to Trudy for the next bit.
So this is just really calling out a little more detail about what else is there. So within the platform, there's the training centre, and so the resources will also feature there. So you can go into the Global Health Network on the training and resources side and find a whole categorised list of, so if you go into the data management area, you'll find these and it will link back. So the idea really is that whatever stage in the cycle of setting up your study, you can really find what you need. And then what we're going to focus down on in a second is making sure that we have this focus on research uptake, which Lara will explain more about in a second. Just also to call out some really important parts of this. You know, we're all trying to strengthen research systems and health systems and develop lasting, capable teams. And there's a mechanism within this to capture that. And so there's the professional development scheme, which we built with TDR over 10 years ago now. And we've drawn on that a lot for these lots of these areas, because we developed something called an essential curricula for health research based on a huge study we did. Many of you in the room were involved. And that involved over 4,000 people, explaining where the gaps and the barriers were to research, and that allowed us to evolve a curricula. And so lots of the resources I'm going to show you in a second are bucketed up around those key topic areas, which we'll come back to. But that professional development scheme, anybody can use, and it gives membership levels, 25 membership levels for individuals, and you can aggregate data as a team or as an organisation or as a whole consortia. So in many of the EDCTP networks and project teams, they use this system to build the understanding of the skills within the team, and it tracks it over time. So this is one of the only systems that exist that actually measures capacity development and how it changes over time. So get in touch if you want to know more about it, but it's there to be used. But we can also aggregate the scores for teams. And again, it just links in really well with this of supporting many of the EDCTP grantees in actually tracking their career development and skill acquisition of their team. So the whole point is trying to access, getting information to people where they didn't know they had it before. My dream scenario I always talk about is people finding things they didn't know. So you've got a researcher, say, in Guinea-Bissau, we talked about on Tuesday, one of the first groups coming to, a new group coming to EDCTP. They're setting up a study, say, on leishmaniasis. How fantastic if they found a whole load of resources in the languages that they need to find, but perhaps also something like standard outcome measures where they didn't know they existed, but now they've discovered them, and so they can run their study to international standards where they didn't even know some of these things existed. So they can find their data support, they can find their how to do quality management. And this circle diagram here is how we sort of bucketed up those findings from the essential curricula. And what we're going to really focus on today now, moving on to what next, is to research uptake and making sure findings are taken up into policy and practice. Sam, before we get to the community stories, should we share the QR code so they can upload them? Just a thought. Should we show that now, if they're going to use the system, or is it easy to find? Just quick. Okay, perfect. Just checking. Back over to you. I'll double that.
Thank you. So we've got a few community stories about people who've used the hub and found them useful. And also, I'm delighted to welcome Francis, who is here in the room. And please come up, Francis, who's going to tell us a bit about how he's used the hub and the resources on the network. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, Sam. So thank you, Sam. So I'm Francis Zukin from Cameroon. I'm from the Biotechnology Center of the University of Yaoundé 1, where I'm conducting postdoctoral research, and I'm also a lecturer at the University of Boya, still in Cameroon. So thank you, Sam, for inviting me to give my feedback on how the hub have been useful to me and also to my students. So before I highlight how these have been useful, I will just give a small history on my background. I defended my PhD in 2019, December 2019, and early 2020, just before the COVID, and I was preparing a small grant, a small protocol to submit for a grant, and the grant was launched by the Global Heart. So I prepared the protocol and I submitted the protocol. Maybe 3 months, 4 months later, the feedback came and it was not really successful, means I did not get it. Yes, and I was trying to understand what's happened exactly. So I went back to the same website, and this how I get into contact with the different tools which are actually available in that site, and which from that time have been very useful to me. How? Because immediately after that, I started preparing now a draft, a concept for an EDCTP postdoctoral project that I develop and submit using the tool, and especially the SPECT, which is a very interesting toolkit for protocol development. And after that, I submitted my protocol, and yes, the protocol was successful after. And I got that grant under the for the EDCTP. So, and from there, the tool I've been advising people to use the tool to my students, especially because the most interesting is not the step you are following in the spec to like or toolkit, but the feedback you are getting from others, and which really guides you on the different mistakes that maybe you've made, or which will be helpful for the next steps. And I realized that students can still use this tool, this tool too, because most of the time when I have a student, I always, as soon as you receive a research topic, the first thing I ask you is to bring me a concept idea. Yes, the concept idea is to know, to understand first if the student exactly know what he wants to do before getting into protocol development. And this tool is very powerful in that process because we direct the student on how to draft a good background, how to come out with a good rationale, how to lay out the different objectives and activities to be conducted. And as soon as the student is acquainted of all those things, protocol development become a great and is something to swallow easily. So this is how I've been using the herb, and today is still very important for me because I'm actually preparing a career development project, and that's how I'll be submitting to the Welcome Trust. And my protocol is almost ready for submission, and I can just say thank you to the SPECT platform and toolkit for that. Thank you, Sam.
Okay, thank you, Francis. That's brilliant. And we've got a couple of very short clips from Matilda and Oscar about their experiences too.
We talk a lot within my team regarding applying for grants, defining a research question. For example, what can we work with? We may hear of a call that is going on. How do we join other people? What is a research question? How do we define a research question? So all this type of information, I just point them to the hub. And very often, I mean, they get lost in the hub because there's so much information that they go there for one thing, but they can find out there's so much that they can get from the hub. Personally, what I liked most was that because I was involved in drafting 3 separate protocols within the hub. And so my experience in that work was that the process involved crowd review and knowledge sharing. So through the process, I was able to link up with people I didn't know before. Yeah, people from Zimbabwe, Dominican Republic, for example, Pakistan, Kenya, India. Yeah, so I was able to tap into their expertise. Otherwise, you know, those expertise may not have been available in my own network before that. So I found it's a wonderful way to sort of global approach to science community. And the bit that I like most is that idea that you can link up to others, you can access other people's expertise, and you can work together with people you didn't know before. So expanding your network, your line of connection to other researchers around the world. So that's the bit I like most. There is easily available information, tools and resources, they're easily available. So if one is starting, especially the young graduates, I'm talking about the young researchers, very often they get lost in terms of where to start from, where can they get information from. You know, examples like if you want to draft a research questions, or how do you pull together a protocol. So the hub has got all that, has got practical examples, and you can look at other things as well within the hub that can build individuals, young people into, knowing, having the knowledge in research. So it's a good starting point. That's where I would really recommend anybody to visit the hub.
From my side, the most critical feature of the hub was the crowdsourcing or the protocol development tool. The tool enabled us to get real-time reviews of protocols, data collection tools, and SOPs and provide us an opportunity to, to avoid, of course, the multiple emails, because obviously getting feedback from, let's say, 170 people through an emails would be really impossible to deal with that. But the protocol development tool allowed us to incorporate even feedback that came from different people, and that this was in a real time format. That's number one. Number two, I think one of the things that the hub has also been able to assist us is that we've been able to work with different people, early career researchers, mid-career, and senior researchers, and some who have senior people. This was enabled by the fact that the protocol development tool could bring everyone together, and everyone could contribute in whatever way they were able to do it, which is something that I've never experienced, and also even my team and different colleagues as well in our region had never experienced. So I think it was very, very rich to be able to get those contributions. Some of the people, we may never meet them, and some of the people we may never even interact in future, because of the different areas that we work in and the different spaces that we are working in. But through this protocol development kit, we're able to get their feedback, and that information, that knowledge, that expertise we've also used it, not beyond the protocols and the tools that we're developing for the hub, but we continue to use some of those expertise and some of the knowledge, or some of the feedback in our protocols that we are already developing post-COVID, or in other areas that are not actually directly linked to COVID-19.
So thank you, Matilda and Oscar, for those great clips. Back to Trudy.
So shortly, we're going to be really pulling you into this and asking for your help on how we take this forward. I just want to show you a little bit of interim data, but just so Francis, thank you for doing that. I think it's really important to hear how it works, and this is exactly why we did it. And I just want to call out that crowd sourcing concept area we have. So the concept protocol tool was something we developed in Kilifi in the KEMRI Welcome Programme about 15 years ago to do exactly that, to help researchers just one page think about what's your research question, what do you want to measure to ask that question, where are you measuring it, who are you measuring it with, and how can you do it well every single time, and is it going to work? And that form, if you can get that right, then you can design a really good study that can answer your question and deliver the evidence you want. And also have the research uptake piece, which we're going to come on to within that. So what we've done through the hub, with the EDCTP hub, is turn that into a crowd facility. So just because it was just really great how that came up. Because if a group planning a research study isn't working in an area with a big KEMRI Welcome or any other big research facility around, which many of you are all part of, they don't have chance to ask peers and get that really expert opinion. And so that's what we were trying to replicate, to create that equity and access, to really help people develop a really strong concept protocol. And you need that before you even begin to fill out an application form for funding, and let alone your final protocol. So it's a really great thing to see that crowd review or the crowd input to that coming through. And I think that's something we really want to build on. So thank you. It's just really nice to hear that it's working. I just want to show you a bit of data. This is unpublished, and so this is just some sort of pooled data from two big pieces of work we've just done, one with Wellcome and one with the World Health Organization. This was, again, using the Global Health Network community to ask questions, and this is the really expanding potential we have from this vast connected community of hundreds of thousands of researchers across the globe. And again, it was nice to hear that the crowd review is pulling in input from India, the Dominican Republic, Pakistan, and this is the point. So this is about 6,000 community members of the Global Health Network responded to questions around where there are research barriers. One was focused on infection and another was on the World Health, the WHO Directive on Clinical Trials you might have heard about yesterday with Vasi. And in both those different pieces of work, we also asked what the barriers are to doing this research. So this is sort of pooled data. It's very big numbers, so it makes it good, but this is just an interim analysis. But it's access to research skills training, access to management support. You know, we know the things that make research difficult to achieve. And so we're using these data to really guide what we're doing. And within this as well, we had feedback about what could be done to make a difference. And so those pieces that we're focusing on across the whole of the Global Health Network and absolutely focusing down through the hub, this is giving access to skills training, but it's also around all those particular blocks. And so this is what we're going to base this on today. I'm going to pass this back to Lara because it's really moving forward now. What next?
Thanks, Judy, and thank you again, Francis. That was really great to hear about how actually the initial kind of motivation for developing this hub was to try and make sure that we could help researchers to apply for EDCTP grants, but obviously not just for EDCTP grants. So it's really great to hear that story. Thank you. So what next? So we kind of already hinted at what is next, but the idea now is to try and see. So we have now a lot of grantees. You heard from Michael's presentation on Tuesday, was it? How we're already seeing a lot of results coming out of those grants. We're now at the latter stages of the EDCTP2 program, and we're expecting many projects to still complete. And so we really thought, what could we do to still support our grantees especially, but obviously the wider research community on how to then translate those results into policy and practice. And so that's where the idea came to try and now develop an extra toolkit on translating research into policy. And alongside that, and I have to say, so the initial phase of the hub was funded through EU funding and CEDA support, the Swedish government. And we, with discussions with the UK Department for Health and Social Care, came to come to this conclusion to support this additional element onto the hub. So we must also acknowledge their support for this. And alongside that, the other rationale for this additional support is to kind of support our activities with the EDCTP regional networks, which obviously are doing a huge amount of work, but one area that we know that there is sort of difficulty for them to try and coordinate is on knowledge management without sort of real dedicated posts to really focus on that. So with this DHSC funding, we've also now got some support for dedicated research managers across those 4 regional networks, and they will also be feeding into this new toolkit that we're developing. That's just a little bit of background of why we now move on to this next part. And I don't know, I think it was you now, Trudy, or was it Sam? Is it the poll? Ah, okay.
Thank you.
We're definitely making the sort of workshopy bit here. So Sam's going to explain the technical piece in a second, but really what we want to talk about this. So the diagram here is really the data we've had from years of asking where the barriers occur to research, and then going deeper into that in this particular question around research uptake. You know, we've all long been saying there's no point just finishing your study at your publication, and for some groups maybe they've done work over years and years and you've got 50 amazing publications out in the journals, but I always say this is the so what bit. You know, what do you do next? There's no good just leaving that in the journals. You need to pull those things out and turn them into actual recommendations that can be taken up into policy and practice. And so what does that look like for each study? Is it a video? Is it some treatment guidelines to go on the wall of your clinic? Is it some training notes or a training whole course that you're going to do with your caregivers? Or is it a policy document? Are you going to work it out across the whole country, up to your government, WHO level? You know, there's many examples we heard about on Tuesday night of the success of some of the studies that have come out from EDCTP, but the real magic happens when you do this step. And this is really hard, and there's not a lot out there in terms of guidance. So we want to pull this together into a process flow and a toolkit for really helping researchers go through every step of the so what, I call it. You know, how do you pull out what are you actually saying from your beautiful data that's buried in a, really probably hard to digest New England Journal paper or whatever it is. And so this is what we want to begin to set you to work at doing now, in really pinpointing what would be useful and where are the areas of difficulty. And so I'll pass to Sam to do the really techie bit with you on getting you all involved in this. See, that's the techie bit.
So,
Phones out, everyone.
it would be lovely for you all to take part in a very brief survey, which you can access by taking a photo of the QR code there. It should take you to the first page of just a few questions, and we'd like to get some thoughts from you guys about translating research into practice. So I'm hoping this will work, and the responses should appear live on the screen, if all being well. So if you've all had a chance to scan the code.
So has everybody photographed it? Because we'll move on to putting the questions on here so we can call them up. Excellent, excellent. Can people online do it as well? Presumably.
Yes.
Yep, excellent. So everybody done that? Do we see phones out?
So
A few
far.
more. Just okay, everybody done it? Excellent. So the first poll. So the questions are really quite easy binary one to start you off. Did you find that your findings are being used and taken up? Are you really doing that so what piece and working out what you're going to do with your studies? So it's 50-50. That's really interesting. I'd love to know the demographics of who researchers dig in a bit more. So I'm really interested to. So let's pick on somebody. I'd like to hear from somebody in the audience who's brave enough to tell us that they haven't. Can I have hands up? I'm very old school. Who finds it difficult and would be willing to say, yeah, I find it quite hard to do this. Anybody brave? All right, put your hands up then. The sort of successful people. Who's been good at this? So it's all this at all. Yeah, excellent. Well done. Just one. You're very shy. You're very shy. Excellent. Excellent. Come on, give us an example. Have we got a roving mic? I'm going to warm you all up. So there's no such thing as a free coffee. So, oh, look, dead on 50-50. Look at that. We didn't make this up. So I'm really interested in the... oh, look, it's changing. What we want to learn from in these experiences is the people who are doing this well. This is where we're going to... we want to find out what's worked for you, and we'll come on to this in a second. What are you doing that is translating your lovely papers into training courses or recommendations? And for those of you who aren't doing it well, what are you finding difficult? And that's what we're going to come on to.
Okay,
thank
you very much. It's nice to see you again. I think we met last year in Cape Town. So my name is Yoba Seido. I work for the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and I do have experience from the industry and also in research. But I think we do have, as researchers, we have a lot of limitations. So that's really one of the things that I understood when I started working in the development world, because the development world is actually focused on getting things implemented, at least translating research findings into policy and recommendations. And that's one of the things we don't do well as researchers. And there are typical methodologies for doing that. You need to engage the stakeholders, you need to socialize the ideas, you need to build technical working groups, you need to mobilize the funding, you need to train, and so on and so forth. And the interesting thing is that there are some organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that have developed tools like the target policy profile that researchers can use early on in the career to actually map a pathway for policy and implementation that I think researchers should use.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. And part of the process is going to be scoping what's there already. Does anybody else want to just comment on this being a gap or something they do well before we go on to the next question? Just really good to hear actual example. That light's really bright. I can't see anything. I can't actually see. If anybody could take that light down a little bit. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Hussein from Malawi. I just wanted to say that I think part of the problem is that it's really difficult to break through the policy interests that the stakeholders, who are actually the policymakers, have. Because in low resource settings, a lot of our support is coming from outside, and then that can be also, driving the interests of the country. So you might find something else, but even though the evidence is there, they might not actually take it up because, well, the funds that are there aren't there to support what you've just found.
Excellent, really good point. Any more points or examples of people saying, yeah, there's a hand up at the back. Sorry, it's just got, you have to.
Sorry, I think we've only got a couple. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Tom de Croo from Institute of Tropical Medicine in Antwerp. I do research mainly through students, and even though what we find is not maybe written later on in a guideline like formally, but they are embedded in the programs, and so anyhow any lesson learned has a direct minor or sometimes major, but usually minor impact on daily practice. So I think that's a nice way of working. Yeah.
That's great, and it'd be really great to capture that. And I think lots of organisations are quite good at saying, okay, you know, let's really plan at the beginning. What are you going to do with those findings when you've got them? But it's often not formalised, and it's quite hard to find toolkits, especially pragmatic research. I think sometimes for clinical trials or product development, that target product profile is quite clear. But for pragmatic studies, maybe that are looking at all sorts of things from hygiene practices maybe or antibiotic use, it's not as clear that it's not going to be a huge maybe policy change at a country level, but it might be training the workforce in situ. So it's having those sort of toolkits available for all those things. Any more comments before we go on to the next question? Yeah, on here.
Thank you very much. I'm Mauli from Ghana. Actually, just wanted to comment on translating the research into policy. I have a classical example where we did a research and then published our findings. Unfortunately, our findings were not in favor of the government's projects and initiatives. And they took it quite hard on us. They were not really happy with the findings that we presented. But I mean, it's one of the challenges that we often face, in that when you produce results and it's not really in favor of some of those in policy and they are not happy with it, then they tend to more or less fight you. So there's always that gap in trying to really synergize or put researchers and policymakers together, which I think most often will be more beneficial when they are together from scratch. They work together from the beginning to do the research, and then they understand the whole process from beginning to the end. But if they don't understand from the beginning, they bring the results, then they find it difficult in accepting the results that you present.
Here you go. You said it all there. I mean, that is exactly it. And we could spend another hour workshopping that process of engaging your target audience at the beginning so they're on board. And that's exactly what we want to capture. And giving teams, especially when they're not from big research organisations or feel they've got the confidence to do that, how do you approach those policymakers and work with them from the outset so that people are ready to accept the findings? So we need to move on to the next question. So what barriers exist in promoting research uptake at your community or end user level? So exactly these pieces. So this is a more complicated question. There are more options. Can we see the ones on screen?
Yes.
Can I, if I click on?
When they
finish. Okay, perfect.
Short,
Yeah.
it's a short line.
Excellent. So this is really getting into some of the barriers. And we're going to use these data, by the way. It's great we've had so many people come this morning because this is really, we've got such fantastic experience in the room that we really will be taking these findings and especially these comments like this.
And I think
Lara.
this code it can be used by anyone, right? Even beyond today. So I think it's also
we'll
good if you
keep
can
it up.
share it within your
exactly.
colleagues and
So
so on.
this is definitely true workshopping, and this is data we'll use. So think carefully and make sure you contribute. Okay, so here we go. If any of you are feeling brave enough, it'd be really useful to hear some examples like we've just heard to just bring this to life. So start having a think and put your hands up now. It's really difficult for me to see the hands with this light here, but my colleagues can see. So you can see what's coming up here: cultural and professional barriers, limited resources, misunderstanding of the research findings, budgets, politics. You can see how these are coming together. Let's have some explanation of these. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Joe Bonnie from Ghana.
Hello, Joe.
Hi. So the one I put up was the poor stakeholder mapping. So it's become evident that we all know that there should be stakeholders we should engage. But if this is not done properly, then you end up speaking to the wrong people, and you tick the box that you have engaged some people. But if you don't do this with the local context, with people that are really in that space, you might not be speaking to the right people, and then eventually you miss out on being able to move it to the community when the work is done, or being able to move it into policy in the long run.
Yeah, that's great, Joe, absolutely. A quick other comment, otherwise we'll move on to the next question, but it's just great to hear some of these examples. Any more? Oh, very quiet that side of the room. Feeling like pantomime now, I have to divide it up. Okay, should we move on? Yeah, let's do the next question then. Okay, so the barriers exist to promoting research uptake. So how do you translate it? So these are really digging down now. We're just coming deeper and deeper into these. So you can see them on your screen. And as Lara said, we'll keep this going. So feel free to share this with colleagues, and we'll put it up on the platform so you can share it around. All these graphics are fantastic. Oh, look at that. Yeah, I know, my eyesight, you're having a... What have we got?
It's easier to see on the phone, I think.
Yeah. What's coming out top? Lack of experience. Excellent. So this is why I would have... It's good, actually, it's really interesting having this mixture of people in the room. And I think this... Yeah, so that's really interesting. I think from what we hear a lot when we talk about this in workshops in the region and we discuss with the teams, this lack of experience or really knowing where to start, which we also should be right at the beginning of thinking, okay, I'm doing this study, what am I going to do with the findings? That's where you should be meeting with your policymakers or your people in the hospitals, whoever your target audience is. But it's a big step, and it takes, you've got to have a lot of confidence to do that and know what you're asking. So, and I think that collaboration and networking piece is really what we heard about earlier, about people working together and trying to solve those. Yes? I want to know what the three other is. That's always, I love outliers.
So, one of the others, and I think what I found again with the PhD students is that sometimes that the agenda is driven by international actors, because the power comes from where the money comes from, I would say. And so even if they are convinced of their own research findings, which could be relevant to their own context, they might not be empowered to translate that into policy and practice change because of a larger international agenda.
Great. And the young lady at the side here.
Thanks very much. It's Val Snewen here from one of the funders. And I'll just give the counter to that, which is from my experience as a research funder, I think one of the issues is often the research issues are actually set by the researchers rather than the policymakers. And it's taken me a long time actually in my career to realise this, that people think that it's us, the funders, setting the agenda, but sometimes that may be true. But many research funders have open calls, which is for you, the research community, to come in with your great ideas, and then they get funded. So what I would say is, I mean, Trudy's doing an excellent job here in encouraging this, but really right from the start, if the questions come in, if the research questions genuinely come in, addressing what people, the policymakers or the stakeholders in the community really want, then you're like 50% at least of the way there, I think, to answering all the questions we've got here. So that's just one thing I was going to say. My other point is always about quality and synthesis of research. And, I used to work at the Wellcome Trust a long time ago, and the director there used to say, well, we don't want every researcher knocking on the door of the policymaker, which is true. And we also don't want only Department of Health and the UK research or EDCTP research going into policy either. So I'm sure Trudy's going to get onto this, but somewhere there has to be a bit of a synthesis job as well, that maybe it's not just your study alone that's going to change practice in that hospital, but maybe it needs to be chunked up and synthesized. And who is best placed to do that? Sometimes it's you guys, sometimes it's maybe a professional organisation or WHO regional office or other actors. So just maybe also to expand the conversation into quality, the quality of what goes into policymakers and the communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Val. And I think they're great points. And I think that's really interesting that those two strong elements that have come out, I think both of those points that, and we've heard it a few times already, about involving your target audience. They could be policymakers, they could be whoever the people that you're going to try and influence, that they should be, setting the questions with them at the beginning, involving the community in the true sense of what we mean by community engagement in research isn't necessarily literally just the community, but the decision makers and the stakeholders in what you're doing right at the beginning. And then I think that networking collaboration piece, Val, is exactly that. It's looking at what the whole landscape's doing and working with others who are doing research in the same area. And you've got stronger voices, and it's a more kind of unified message. So that's fantastic. So should we go on to the next one? Oh, there's another question. Excellent. Sorry.
Sorry, just to come back and also share my experience. I think one thing that is one thing that is clear to everyone is that the global community is actually focused on achieving or accomplishing the sustainable development goals, and research actually plays a very key role in towards this endeavor. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we have realized is that most often there is always an misalignment between research outputs and the expectations of policymakers. I think we have, and we actually realized that after studying the policy making pathway in Cameroon, at least studying policy making across 17 vertical programs. So there is really, I think the paper has been published in Gates Open Research. I think if you go there, you actually see some of the challenges and some of the recommendations of the stakeholders. But overall, I think they are interested in research findings, but this must be aligned to their national priorities, and also will have to demonstrate how it's going to help the country to achieve the targets outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals.
That's great. Excellent. We're going to have just one more question because we need to finish on time so you can all get to the main sessions. But there are some more that you can look at in your own time, and we'll be putting them up on the hub so that we can broaden this out as well. So have a look at this, what can be done at the community level. And just to emphasise again, by community, we mean the community of patients where you're aiming to make change, but also the community stakeholders. So the practitioners in the place where you're doing the research, the stakeholders in government or local healthcare management, whoever they may be. And so let's have a quick look at those, and we'll be aiming to finish on time for sure. I think there's another couple of questions on the system, but we thought we'd just see how we got on with your engagement. Excellent.
And I'm sorry if there are responses or questions online, because I don't think we have access to see them, unfortunately. But we'll
get them.
Yeah.
So anybody, whilst we're filling it in, anybody want to make any more comments or points whilst this is coming in? Good to hear from. Yes.
Hi. So I actually wanted to ask a question, which is from your presentation when you began, you alluded to data sharing and maybe making data more accessible to the various sites. And I feel like the rest of the presentation sort of glossed over this because we talked more about the knowledge and knowledge sharing. And I think one other issue that comes to mind is the fact that a lot of the sites, the African sites that actually generate the data, don't get to own the data. And it's very difficult to actually access the data, and maybe especially in a timely manner. So how is this endeavor that you have here going to help transfer some of the ownership back to the African sites so that they can also access it, even if it's for things like teaching purposes, but also the general knowledge generation as well?
It's a really excellent point, thank you. And so we talked about data at the beginning because that was how this hub began, with some tools and resources for data sharing and good data management in the first place, and where data can be shared. If you're working on a study which is a collaborative a study where you're one of the many sites, you're exactly true, the data goes off elsewhere. More and more, there's a shift for that data set to come back to you, and that's something that countries should be able to negotiate and should happen more and more. And those same data sets should be available for people to use. So that's a whole really important area that is covered within the hub and other areas. So we can point you to resources to do that. And we also trying to encourage lots more locally led studies where the data are yours and can stay. And I think there's a whole area on data science which talks about this, around possibilities for federated analysis and data staying in situ are just evolving really fast, which is super exciting. But it's a great point, but we kind of moved onto what's next about research uptake into practice, because it's the next piece on this facility. But they're so important, those points, so thank you. Okay, so I think we've got these in now. Does it generate a nice pie chart again?
Not for this.
Okay, perfect. So lots of points coming up here. Does anybody want to talk through any particularly? And then we need to wrap up very quickly. Same sort of messages coming through about, really having some tools, I think, to try and translate some of those findings. But we'll pull all these together with the next questions, and up on the hub we'll be sharing the findings as one should in good research. Excellent. Can we have the last summary slide? We should wrap up just so we finish. Just click onto the last slide. So thanks everyone for taking part this morning. It was really great you all got up so early. I'll just pass to Lara quickly, but just to say stay involved. We've got a standout in here. We've got another talk later you might also be interested in, just flagging that on one of the mechanisms we can use. And thanks very much, but let me pass to Lara to wrap up.
No, I don't think there's much to add, just to say thank you very much for your active engagement, and we would certainly be reaching out to you, I think, in future to try and develop the tools further. And of course, if you have feedback on the earlier aspects of the hub, that was great to get that feedback. Please do share with us too, because we're constantly looking at how we can improve the tools. So we won't keep you from the plenary. I think it's starting probably in 1 minute. Thank you very much.